Galactic Council sent Earth a threat. Earth replied with a thank you note. 47 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system at exactly 11:58 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. They did not slow down or ease into position the way a visitor might. They simply appeared all at once, in a coordinated arc stretching from just beyond the orbit of Neptune to a point 3 astronomical units south of the ecliptic plane. Each ship was enormous. The smallest of them was twice the length of the largest aircraft carrier ever built on Earth. The largest was the size of a small city, its hull dark and smooth, covered in patterns that might have been decorative or might have been functional, and no human alive could tell the difference yet. The automated tracking systems at the Lunar Observation Array picked them up in less than 4 seconds. The alert reached the Unified Earth Defense Command in another 6. By the time the duty officer, a tired young man named Peter Hale, had rubbed the sleep from his eyes and confirmed what his screen was showing him, the lead vessel of the Galactic Council had already begun broadcasting on every frequency Earth used for communication. The message was not long. It did not need to be. It identified itself as a formal ultimatum transmission from the Galactic Council governing body of 112 recognized civilizations across 4 star clusters. It named Earth by its galactic designation. It stated, in language translated into all 43 of Earth's most widely spoken languages, that humanity was ordered to dismantle every military installation beyond the planet's atmosphere, surrender all research related to faster-than-light travel, and submit to full Council oversight. It gave a deadline of 72 planetary rotations, and it stated, plainly, that failure to comply would result in total orbital suppression. Total orbital suppression. The phrase was polite, almost clinical. It meant the Council would remove everything in Earth's orbit and render the planet unable to reach space for a generation. The message ended there. Peter Hale stared at his screen for 3 full seconds. Then he picked up the direct line to the Secretary General's office, took a breath, and started talking. Across the city, in an office on the 14th floor of the Earth Diplomatic Headquarters building, Ambassador Kate Mercer was already awake. She had not slept well. She rarely did anymore. She was 51 years old, had spent 23 of those years in interstellar diplomacy, and she had a habit of waking at odd hours when her instincts told her something was happening. Tonight, her instincts had been very loud. Her tablet was already lighting up with alerts when the call from Peter Hale came through. She read the summary before she answered. She read it again after she hung up. Then she walked to her small kitchen, filled the kettle and turned it on. Her deputy, a sharp young woman named Lena Voss, knocked and entered without waiting. Lena was the best xenolinguist Earth had ever produced. She was also one of those rare people who appeared to function on approximately 4 hours of sleep and a remarkable amount of coffee. She was holding a printout of the full transmission, and her eyes were already moving fast across the page. "They embedded a tactical scan," Lena said. She did not say hello. She rarely did when something interesting was happening. Kate poured the hot water over her tea bag and did not look up. "Tell me." The standard Council ultimatum protocol includes a full scan of the target's military infrastructure. It is meant to intimidate. They show you the scan data to prove they already know everything about you. Lena dropped the printout on Kate's desk and tapped a section of dense technical data near the bottom of the document. But to transmit the scan data, they had to transmit the scanner output itself. And the scanner output contains the exact energy signature of the scanning array. Which means we now have the precise frequency profile of their detection systems. Kate looked up, and their weapon signatures. Embedded in the targeting calibration data they used to map our orbital platforms. Lena paused. They also included their full communication encryption header, which I started working on 40 minutes ago. Kate looked at her for a long moment. Then she sat down, pulled her tablet toward her, and opened a blank message window. Lena watched her. "What are you doing?" Replying, Kate said, "To a military ultimatum." "Yes." Lena leaned against the doorframe. "What are you going to say?" Kate typed for approximately 11 minutes. She reread what she had written. She changed one word, then she pressed send. Lena crossed the room and looked at the screen. The message read, "On behalf of the United Earth Parliament, we thank the Galactic Council for their thorough and informative transmission. We look forward to further dialogue at your earliest convenience." It was signed, Ambassador Kate Mercer, Earth. Lena read it twice. Then she started laughing, quietly, in the way people laugh when something is either very funny or very dangerous, and they are not yet sure which. "They told us exactly how to beat them," Kate said. She was already reaching for her phone. "The least we can do is be polite about it." The thank you note left Earth's communication array at 3:47 in the morning. It traveled at the speed of light toward the edge of the solar system and reached the Council's lead vessel 11 minutes and 22 seconds later. While it was traveling, Kate made 3 calls. The first was to General Owen Drake at the Unified Earth Defense Command. The second was to Intelligence Director Dean Frost. The third was to Admiral Ava Quinn, whose current location was listed in the official fleet registry as Deep Space Patrol, Sector 7, which was technically true but also somewhat incomplete. Owen Drake picked up on the first ring, which told Kate he was already in his command center. "I saw the transmission," he said, before she could speak. "What is your read?" Kate asked. 47 ships, impressive formation, coordinated faster-than-light drop, which means disciplined fleet command. A pause. "They are good. They are just not expecting us to have been ready." "Are we ready?" Another pause, shorter this time. "We have been ready for 12 years. Kate put the phone down and looked out her window at the city below. The streets were quiet. Most of the population was asleep. The alert had not been made public yet. In a few hours, Secretary General Neil Harper would address the Parliament. There would be urgent sessions and emergency briefings and a great deal of noise. But right now, in the quiet of her office, Kate Mercer allowed herself one small thought. They had handed Earth everything it needed, tucked inside the threat itself. And they had done it because they expected Earth to be afraid. That, she decided, was going to be the most expensive assumption in the history of the Galactic Council. Dean Frost's office was on the 3rd subterranean level of the Strategic Bureau building, a place that did not appear on any public city map and was unofficially the most information-dense room on the planet. When Kate's call came through, Dean was already surrounded by 4 analysts who had been awake since the alert, each of them working through a different section of the transmission data. Dean was a precise man. He did not speculate. He did not guess. He gathered facts and assembled them carefully, the way a watchmaker puts together something complicated and delicate, and he did not hand over conclusions until he was confident they would hold under pressure. Kate had worked with him for 9 years and had learned that when Dean said something was possible, it was probable, and when he said it was probable, it was already done. "The scan data gives us their shield frequency range," he said, without any greeting. "We also have the power output readings from their main weapon arrays, which tells us the energy threshold they expect a target to withstand. And there is something else." "Go ahead," Kate said. "The transmission includes what looks like a standard navigational header. Routine. But the header contains the positional data of every ship in the formation and their current orbit coordinates." He paused. "Which means we know exactly where all 47 of them are down to the meter, and we can predict their positions for the next 140 hours. Kate said nothing for a moment. "They gave us all of that voluntarily." "Standard protocol," Dean said. "They have done this 100 times. The data is meant to show the target how thoroughly it has been mapped. It never occurred to them that the target might use it the other way around." Kate ended the call and turned back to her window. Out in the dark at the edge of the solar system, 47 warships held their formation and waited for what they expected would be panic. They waited for emergency broadcasts, for military scrambles, for the chaotic noise of a civilization suddenly confronting something it was not prepared for. Instead, they received a thank you note, warmly worded, politely signed, sent in 43 languages. On the bridge of the Council's lead vessel, the High Emissary, a figure named Vorlin who had served the Council for longer than most humans had been using electricity, read the message one more time and felt, for the first time in a career spanning 200 years of interstellar diplomacy, genuinely uncertain. Vorlin had delivered the standard Council ultimatum to 19 civilizations. 14 had surrendered immediately. 4 had attempted to resist and had been swiftly corrected. 1 had gone silent and had been left alone, which the Council considered a satisfactory outcome. Not one of them had ever replied with a thank you. He read the message a fourth time, then set it down on the command surface in front of him and looked at his senior officers. Subcommander Vreth spoke first. "Cultural translation error," he said, with the confidence of someone who preferred simple explanations. "The concept of an ultimatum may not carry the same weight in human communication. They may not fully understand what they received." Admiral Gorak, who commanded the fleet's forward line, shook his head. "They sent it in 43 of their own languages. They understood it." "Then it is a bluff," Vreth said. "A display of false confidence. They are attempting to project calm to avoid showing weakness." The eldest member of the Council delegation, an advisor named Sira who had witnessed more civilizational confrontations than anyone else in the room, had not spoken yet. She was reading the original transmission data on her personal screen, not the message itself, but the technical header information surrounding it. She had been reading it since the thank you note arrived, and the longer she read, the more still she became. "Pull their historical archive," she said quietly. "The full one, not the summary." Vorlin looked at her. "Sira." "All of it," she said. "Everything we have, start from the beginning." Vorlin hesitated, then nodded to his data officer. The archive request went through. "It will take time to compile," the data officer said. "The file is very large." "I know," Sira said. She did not look up from her screen. On Earth, the 72-hour clock was moving. In the basement of the Strategic Bureau building, Dean Frost's team had divided the transmission data into 6 separate analysis tracks. The shield frequency data went to Chief Engineer Adrian Cole's division, which occupied a long building on the edge of the spaceport district, and had been working on theoretical counter-frequency systems for the better part of a decade. The weapon array output data went to Owen Drake's tactical division. The navigation header went to Admiral Ava Quinn's fleet command, which was not in any official location at all. Lena Voss sat in the corner of Dean's office with a second monitor and a very large cup of coffee, and did something no one else in the building had thought to do. She wrote back. Not an official communication. Something smaller. A polite follow-up message, sent under Kate's diplomatic authorization, asking the Council about the formal protocols for opening interspecies dialogue. It was a dry and harmless bureaucratic question, exactly the kind of thing a compliant civilization might send while preparing to negotiate the terms of its surrender. But to answer it, the Council had to respond, and every response contained a new transmission header, a new encryption handshake, a new data packet, and Lena collected every single one. Kate appeared in the doorway of Dean's office at 7 in the morning, holding her own tea, and watched Lena work for a moment. "How many responses have you gotten?" "3 so far," Lena said. "They are trying to figure out what we want. Every time they respond, they include a little more technical data in the header. I believe they are running their own analysis on us and keep recalibrating their scan." She tapped her screen. "Which is generous of them." Kate allowed herself a small smile. "Keep going." General Owen Drake was not smiling. He was standing in front of a display covering an entire wall of the Defense Command Operations Center, showing the position of every Council vessel in real time, updated from Dean's navigation data. Beside him stood Tactical Commander Claire Hayes, who carried the focused, quiet energy of someone who had been preparing for a moment like this for so long that its arrival felt less like a crisis and more like a long-awaited appointment. "If the shield counter-frequency works," Claire said, "we do not need to fire a single shot. We only need to demonstrate that we can." "Adrian says the prototype performed at 94% efficiency in testing," Owen said. "Against a simulated frequency based on the scan data, he is confident." "How many can he produce in 72 hours?" Owen looked at the production estimate on his tablet. "He says 40 minimum, 60 if his team does not sleep." Claire looked at the display. "There are 47 ships." "Yes," Owen said, "there are." A silence settled between them, the kind that did not need filling. Adrian Cole's engineering floor was, by mid-morning, the loudest room on the planet. Not with confusion, but with the particular noise of people who know exactly what they are doing and are moving at the absolute limit of their ability to do it. Fabrication units ran in shifts. Components were tested, adjusted, retested. Adrian moved between stations with a tablet and a focused expression, making small corrections, approving designs, answering questions in short, precise sentences. He had been awake for 22 hours and showed no sign of noticing. The counter-frequency emitter was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It did not fire anything. It generated a precisely calibrated energy wave at the specific frequency that the Council's shielding system used, creating a resonance interference that caused the shield to destabilize and collapse entirely. It was, in theory, like pressing exactly the right key to open a lock built to stop everything except that one key. In practice, it was one of the most precisely engineered devices ever built by human hands, and Adrian had 12 of them completed by early afternoon. Dean Frost walked through the engineering floor at 2 in the afternoon and stopped beside Adrian. 60, he asked. 63, Adrian said. I found a faster assembly method. Dean nodded slowly. Good. He sent a one-line update to Kate and Owen, then went back to his office and continued reading the Council's latest transmission header, looking for anything else they had given away without realizing it. On the Council fleet, the Historical Archive on Humanity finished its initial compile at noon Earth time. It was, as the data officer had warned, very large. 142,000 pages of historical documentation, behavioral analysis, linguistic records, and threat assessments compiled over 2 decades of silent observation. Sierra began reading from the beginning. She did not skip anything. 2 hours in, she set the file down and went to find Admiral Gorak. She told him 3 things. She told him that humanity had survived more internal catastrophes than any other species the Council had ever catalogued, and had rebuilt every single time. She told him that the psychological profiling section described a species that responded to existential threat, not with despair, but with what the Council's own analysts had labeled purposeful acceleration. And she told him that in the 2 decades the Council had been observing Earth, human technological development had not been growing steadily. It had been accelerating. The rate of advancement in the last 5 years alone exceeded that of the previous 20 combined. Gorak listened to all of it, then he said, "What are you telling me?" "I am telling you," Sierra said carefully, "that we issued this ultimatum based on observation data that is already outdated. Whatever we mapped 2 years ago, whatever we believe we know about their capability, we are looking at an old photograph of a river and assuming we know where the water is now." Gorak was quiet for a moment. "Vorlin will not pull back." "I know," Sierra said. "Then what do you suggest?" Sierra looked at the stars visible through the ship's observation port. "I suggest we find out, as quickly as possible, what they are actually doing down there." but the Council's long-range sensors could not see through Earth's electromagnetic shielding. Every scan they ran returned the same data they already had. Whatever was happening in Adrian Cole's engineering floor, in Dean Frost's analysis rooms, in the operations center where Owen Drake and Claire Hayes were building something that 47 warships had never encountered, it was invisible to the fleet sitting at the edge of the solar system. All they could see was a quiet planet going about its day, apparently unconcerned. Which was, in its own way, the most alarming thing they had ever seen. Neil Harper had been Secretary General of the United Earth Parliament for 6 years and had handled crises before. Resource disputes, environmental emergencies, the brief and difficult standoff with the Lunar Independent Authority 3 years prior. He was a man who moved through difficult situations the way a ship moves through rough water, not by avoiding the waves but by constantly adjusting his angle to them, never stopping, never panicking. He convened the emergency parliament session at 9 in the morning. The chamber was full. Every delegate had seen the transmission. The room carried the particular charged quality of a space where 119 people are all trying very hard to appear calm. Neil stood at the podium and waited for the noise to settle. Then he said, "The Council has given us 72 hours. I move that we use all of them." The vote on whether to begin compliance discussions passed with 31 votes in favor. The vote on whether to authorize full defensive preparation passed with 112. The remaining 7 delegates were still reading their briefing documents and voted yes when they finished. The Parliament session lasted 40 minutes. It was the most efficient session in the body's history. Admiral Ava Quinn received the authorization update on a secure channel while her fleet was moving. The fleet had no official name in any public document. It was referred to internally as the Deep Reserve, a designation that told you everything and nothing. It consisted of 31 vessels, none of which had ever appeared in any public military registry, all of which had been built and crewed over the past decade in the quiet understanding that the universe was unlikely to stay empty, and that when it stopped being empty, it would be better to have options. The fleet had been running under complete radio silence for 19 hours by the time the authorization came through. Ava read it, passed the updated positioning data to her navigation team, and changed course by 4 degrees. She did not explain the change to her crew. She did not need to. They had been training for this specific deployment for 3 years, and they all understood exactly what a 4-degree course change toward the outer system meant. It meant the clock was running. Back in Kate's office, Lena had by evening accumulated 9 separate Council transmissions and had assembled from their headers a working model of the Council's communication encryption that was, by her own estimate, 91% complete. She had also identified 2 additional scanning frequencies that had not appeared in the original transmission data, which meant the Council had secondary sensor systems they had not revealed. She forwarded the data to Dean immediately, then leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. "They have no idea," she said to no one in particular. Outside, the city had gone quiet. The public alert had gone out late in the afternoon, a carefully worded statement from Neil Harper's office describing the Council's transmission as an opening of formal contact and assuring the population that the government was engaged in active diplomatic proceedings. It was not technically false. It simply chose which parts of the truth to emphasize. The streets had quieted anyway. People had read between the lines, but there was no disorder. People stayed home and watched and waited. It was, Kate thought, exactly the kind of response that no one in the galaxy would have predicted, not because humans were not afraid, but because fear had never stopped them before, and they knew it. 48 hours remained. The 48-hour mark arrived with the quiet efficiency of everything else Earth had done since the transmission landed. There were no speeches, no announcements, just people in rooms doing specific jobs at specific speeds because the clock said there was no time for anything else. Adrian Cole had 63 counter-frequency emitters completed and was testing the 64th when he received the updated ship count from Owen Drake's office. He read the number 47, looked at his 63 units, and made a note to build 4 more before midnight. Not because anyone told him to, because the math said to. Owen Drake was in his operations center, where he had not left in 31 hours. The wall display still showed all 47 council vessels, their positions updated every 15 minutes from Dean Frost's navigation data. Owen was not looking at the ships. He was looking at the space between them, the gaps in their formation, the angles and distances that would matter if things moved past the point of conversation. Claire Hayes appeared beside him with 2 cups of coffee and a tactical layout she had been developing since the previous evening. She spread it on the table, and Owen looked at it without touching his coffee. "If we bring Ava's fleet out from this approach vector," Claire said, pointing to a position behind the Council's rear line, "their reaction time to reorient their forward weapons is approximately 9 minutes. If the orbital platforms are already aimed outward when they look, they will not have a second option." "They will run the numbers," Owen said. "Yes," Claire said, "they will, and the numbers will tell them that any offensive action results in full return engagement from 3 directions simultaneously, which their shield systems will not survive because, by that point, Adrian's emitters will already be active." She paused. "I am not predicting a battle. I am predicting a moment where they look at the numbers and decide not to start one." Owen finally picked up his coffee. 40 hours, he said. 40 hours, Claire agreed. Lena Voss had not slept. She did not appear to find this unusual. She had finished reconstructing the Council's encryption model at 3 in the morning and had spent the following hours translating a set of internal communications transmitted between the fleet's vessels, which until her encryption work was complete had been unreadable noise. Now they were readable. She read them carefully, printed the key sections, and walked them to Kate's office. Kate was asleep on the small sofa near her bookcase. Lena woke her without apology. "The Council has requested Earth's full historical archive," Lena said, sitting down across from Kate while Kate pushed herself upright and reached automatically for her tea, which had gone cold. "They have been reading it for the past 6 hours." Kate looked at her. "All of it." "All of it." The request was flagged as high priority and came from a senior advisory figure, not from Vorlin. "Someone in that fleet is taking this seriously." Lena looked down at her printout. "There are also 3 internal communications between senior officers that express what I would describe as significant uncertainty about the mission." "Meaning they are worried." "Meaning someone in that fleet has read enough of our history to be worried," Lena said. "The senior advisor who requested the archive has gone quiet for the past 4 hours. No transmissions from her personal channel." Kate thought about that. That is the one we need to watch. If she is not talking, she is thinking. And if she is thinking, she has already seen something the others have not. On the Council vessel, Sierra was on page 60,000 of Earth's historical archive and had stopped marking sections because almost every section needed marking. She had read about wars that lasted decades and the people who ended them. She had read about famines and the engineers who solved them. She had read about a species that had nearly destroyed its own planet's atmosphere and had then, through effort and stubbornness and relentless argument, begun pulling it back. She had read the technical logs of Earth's first faster-than-light test flight, conducted 9 years ago, which the Council had flagged as concerning, but had not acted on quickly enough. She had also found, in the behavioral analysis section, a report that a Council xenopsychologist had submitted 12 years ago after spending 3 years studying human communication patterns. The psychologist had written, in a section marked as low priority and apparently never escalated, that human beings processed existential threat in a way that was fundamentally unlike any other species in the Council's database. Most species, when confronted with overwhelming danger, experienced a biological response that prioritized compliance. Humans experience something different. The psychologist had called it threat-converted motivation. The greater the danger, the more focused, the more efficient, the more creative the response. Sierra read the section 3 times. Then she set her reader down and looked at the stars through her window and thought about what a species built like that would do with 72 hours. She went to find Vorlin. He was on the bridge, watching Earth through the long-range display, which showed the planet as a small blue circle surrounded by the scattered lights of its orbital stations. He looked satisfied. He had delivered this ultimatum 19 times. It had worked 19 times. He had no reason to believe this time was different. "Vorlin," Sierra said, "I need you to look at something." "The deadline is in 40 hours, he said without turning. "Whatever your concerns are, they can wait." "They cannot," she said. He turned then, because in 200 years he had never heard her say that. She showed him the xenopsychologist's report. She showed him the acceleration curve on Earth's technological development. She showed him the fact that a species that had just received the most powerful ultimatum the Council could deliver had replied with a thank you note, and continued sending polite follow-up questions as though they were scheduling a meeting. "They are not afraid," she said. "They have never been afraid. Look at their history. Every time something tried to end them, they came back faster than before, every single time." She set the reader down in front of him. "What do you think they have been doing for the past 32 hours? Vorlin looked at the reader. He looked at the planet on his display. He said nothing. "We transmitted a full tactical scan inside our ultimatum," Sierra said. "We gave them our shield frequencies, our weapon output signatures, our navigation data. We gave it because we have always given it to the target, because the target has always been too afraid to use it." The bridge was very quiet. "Pull a deep scan," Vorlin said to his sensor officer. "Everything we can reach." The sensor officer ran the scan. It returned the same data as before: orbital stations, atmospheric defense grids, the surface of a quiet planet. "There is nothing unusual," the sensor officer reported. Sierra looked at the display. "That," she said quietly, "is the problem." Owen Drake had repositioned Earth's 17 orbital platforms over the previous 20 hours, doing it in small incremental moves that each looked like routine maintenance adjustments. Each was logged as a standard positional correction in the publicly visible orbital registry. Each move shifted the platform's primary array 2 to 4 degrees toward the outward-facing angle that Claire Hayes needed. No single move was large enough to trigger an alert in the Council's passive monitoring. Collectively, after 20 hours, every platform was aimed in exactly the right direction. It was the kind of plan that required patience. Humans were patient when patience was useful and relentlessly fast when speed was required, and the particular combination of those two qualities was, Sierra was beginning to understand, exactly what made them so difficult to predict. Lena sent Kate an update at noon. The Council had sent 2 more response transmissions to her polite follow-up questions. Both contained navigational recalibration data indicating the fleet had run additional scans. Both confirmed the scans had detected nothing beyond the expected. Kate read the update, then walked to her window and looked at the city below. Somewhere in the deep water transit routes beyond the horizon, Ava Quinn's fleet was moving. In the engineering complex across the city, Adrian Cole had almost certainly exceeded 67 units and was already wondering whether to build more. In the operations center, Owen Drake and Claire Hayes were looking at their display and calculating angles they had been calculating for 3 years. 38 hours remained. Kate went back to her desk and began preparing the message she would send when the deadline arrived. It was, like all her communications, very polite, very warm, and if you knew exactly where to look, completely capable of stopping a room cold. The deadline expired at 3:14 in the morning, exactly 72 hours after Vorlin's ultimatum had reached Earth's communication array. In the Unified Earth Defense Command Operations Center, someone had placed a quiet countdown timer on one of the secondary displays. When it reached 0, Owen Drake looked at it for a moment, then looked back at his tactical layout and picked up the direct line to Kate. She answered immediately. She had not slept. "It is time," Owen said. "I know," she said. "Give me 2 minutes." She had been sitting at her desk since midnight with the prepared message open on her screen. She read through it one final time. It was 11 lines long. She had written and rewritten it over the previous 30 hours, not because she was uncertain about what it needed to say, but because she wanted every word to land in exactly the right place. On the Council fleet, the bridge of the lead vessel was at full operational status. Every senior officer was present. Vorlon stood at the command surface watching the timer on his display reach 0. Gorek had his hands behind his back with the expression of a man who had been waiting for this moment. Sierra stood at the rear of the bridge and said nothing. The protocol was straightforward. When the deadline passed without compliance, Vorlon would open a final broadcast channel, confirm the expiration of the ultimatum, and issue the order that would begin orbital suppression. The fleet would move from its holding position to a standard suppression arc, and the operation would proceed as it had 19 times before. Vorlon opened the broadcast channel. On the screen in front of him, Ambassador Kate Mercer appeared. She was sitting at her desk. She was holding a cup of tea. She looked, Vorlon noted, like someone who had been awake for a long time but was not tired in any way that mattered. "High Emissary," she said, in the tone of someone who had been expecting a call and was mildly pleased it had finally come. "Good morning. I believe your deadline has passed. We wanted to let you know we have not forgotten about you." Vorlon opened his mouth. He did not speak immediately, because the sentence had not gone in the direction he was expecting. On Earth, the Deep Reserve Fleet received its final positioning confirmation from Avaquin's command. 31 vessels, arranged in a precise arc on the far side of the Council's formation, completed their final approach. Each vessel was running on silent drive. Each crew was at stations. Avaquin stood on the bridge of her lead ship and watched the countdown on her display reach 0. In the engineering division, 67 counter-frequency emitters had been integrated into the visible Earth defense fleet over the previous 18 hours, fitted into the communication arrays of each vessel and platform, so they could be activated from a single coordinated signal. Adrian Cole had tested the integration 3 times overnight. Each test had returned a clean result. In Dean Frost's analysis center, 2 operators were watching the Council fleet's energy output readings on a live feed from the orbital sensor network. They were waiting for one specific reading. Vorlon found his words. "Ambassador Mercer, the terms of the ultimatum were clear. The deadline has passed. Earth has not complied. The Council is authorized and prepared to begin orbital suppression procedures. I strongly advise you to reconsider while you still have the opportunity to do so." Kate looked at him across the transmission. "That is very kind of you," she said. "I appreciate the consideration." Vorlon stared at her. "Before we continue," Kate said, "I did want to thank you again for your original transmission. The scan data was particularly useful. The energy signature information was something our engineering teams had been working toward theoretically for quite some time, and having the confirmed frequency profile allowed them to make very significant progress over the past 3 days. She paused, as though deciding whether to say the next thing. Then she said it. "You may want to check your shield systems." On 41 of the 47 Council warships, the shielding systems failed. Not explosively, not dramatically. They simply stopped. The power readings dropped to 0 as though the shields had decided, quietly and without fuss, that they were no longer interested in functioning. On the bridge, alarms activated. Sensor officers called out readings. Gorak turned from the command surface to his tactical station, his expression changing for the first time. "Vreth, standing near the rear wall, said something that required no translation. Vorlin looked at his own tactical display. 41 of 47 ships without shields. The 6 that still had active protection were the 6 positioned farthest from Earth, at the outer edge of the formation where the emitter signal was weakest. Then General Owen Drake stepped into frame beside Kate. He did not speak. He was holding nothing. His expression was the expression of a man who had a great many things he could say but had decided, years ago, that he would say none of them if he was ever in this room, because the work itself would say everything better than words could. On the outer edge of the solar system, behind the Council's rear line, 31 ships appeared. They did not announce themselves. They were simply not visible, and then they were, in the way that things become visible when they stop trying not to be. They were positioned in a precise encirclement arc, each vessel with its primary systems aimed inward at the Council formation. None had fired anything. None were moving. They were simply there, in exactly the position that made every tactical option the Council had been considering require complete reassessment. At the same time, Earth's 17 orbital platforms, which had been making small routine adjustments for 20 hours, were now fully aligned in their outward-facing configuration. Their primary arrays were active. Their targeting systems were live. Each platform was locked onto a specific Council vessel, distributed evenly across the formation with overlap coverage for the 6 that still had shields. Dean Frost's 2 operators saw the Council fleet's energy output readings fluctuate as weapon systems aboard each vessel came online in automatic response to the shield failure alerts. They sent the activation signal immediately. Vorlin looked at his tactical display for a long time. The bridge was silent except for the alert tones, which his sensor officer quietly muted because they were not providing any new information. The numbers were straightforward. 41 ships without shields, facing a targeting solution from 3 directions simultaneously, with no prospect of restoring the shields because the frequency interference was still active and would continue until whoever was generating it decided to stop. 6 ships with shields were not sufficient to change the situation. Moving forward meant engaging Ava Quinn's fleet from the rear while the orbital platforms held from the front, with no defensive capability across the majority of the fleet. Moving back offered no better outcome. The formation was enclosed on every axis. 47 of the most advanced warships ever constructed had flown into a position where none of them could do anything useful. Sierra at the rear of the bridge looked at the display for a moment. Then she looked at Vorlin. She did not say a word. She did not have to. "Ambassador Mercer," Vorlin said, and his voice carried the careful measure of a man adjusting his footing on ground that had shifted beneath him. "I wonder if we might discuss the specific nature of your capabilities in further detail." "I would be delighted," Kate said. "We have quite a few questions ourselves. About the galaxy, about the Council's charter, about the other civilizations you work with." She took a sip of her tea. "It occurs to us that there is a great deal of ground to cover. We have prepared some initial discussion points if you would like to begin." Gorak at the tactical station ran the numbers a second time. The result matched the first. He slowly powered down the weapons array on the lead vessel and sent the fleet-wide order to follow. 47 weapons arrays went offline. Owen Drake, standing beside Kate, watched the energy readings on the small screen built into Kate's desk drop one by one until all 47 were dark. His expression did not change. He turned and walked out of frame without a word. Later in the operations center, Claire Hayes stood looking at the display where 47 ships sat without shields or weapons, surrounded by a fleet they had never known existed, held in place by a targeting solution they had delivered themselves inside their own ultimatum. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she turned to the junior officer beside her and said, "Start the debrief documentation. I want everything logged before anyone goes home." "Yes, Commander," the officer said. What do we call this in the summary header? Claire considered the display for another moment. 47 ships. No shots exchanged. 3 years of preparation. 67 engineered units. 31 hidden vessels. And 11 minutes of the most precisely coordinated display of capability in human history. All of it resulting in a moment where the largest armed fleet ever to approach Earth simply decided not to act. Call it a diplomatic conversation, Claire said. That is what the ambassador would want. Ava Quinn's fleet held its position for 6 hours after the Council weapons went offline. Standard protocol required confirmed intent before any movement, and Ava was not a person who cut corners on standard protocol regardless of how confident she was about the outcome. She walked the length of her bridge twice, stopped at the forward viewport, and looked at the Council formation ahead. Her crew had been briefed on the full mission 3 hours before the deadline expired. They had received the news with the focused quiet of people who have trained for a specific job and are now being told it is time to perform it. No one had said anything dramatic. They had checked their instruments, confirmed their positions, and gotten on with it. Ava considered this the finest example of professional conduct she had ever witnessed and intended to say so in the formal review. She received Kate's confirmation message at 7 in the morning. The Council fleet had agreed to enter preliminary discussions and was holding position pending the arrangement of a neutral meeting site. Ava read the message, turned to her navigation officer and said, "Hold position. Maintain readiness status." Then she went to her chair, sat down, and for the first time in 4 days allowed herself a breath that was not measured against a clock. At the Defense Command, Owen Drake finally sat down. He was in his chair for the first time in 41 hours. Dean Frost came in with a fresh situation report and set it on Owen's desk, and Owen looked at it without picking it up. "She will want a full capability review before the negotiation," Owen said, meaning Kate. "I already sent her one," Dean said. She replied to say it was thorough and asked whether we had plans for what happens if the Council sends a second fleet. Owen looked at Dean. "Does she mean that as a question or as a task?" "I believe she means both," Dean said. Owen looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he pulled the report toward him and started reading. Adrian Cole was asleep in his chair when his team lead came in at 8 in the morning to report that all 67 emitters were functioning at full output, and the engineering floor had completed its post-operation diagnostic with 0 anomalies. The team lead looked at Adrian asleep in his chair, considered waking him, and decided against it. She left the written report on his desk, turned off the extra lights, and walked out. Adrian slept for 4 hours. When he woke up, he read the report, made one small note about a recalibration he wanted to run on the 3rd unit, and got back to work. That was, as Kate had once said to Lena with genuine warmth, exactly the kind of thing that made humans very hard to stop. The neutral meeting site was a decommissioned deep space relay station called Platform 7, positioned midway between Earth's orbital boundary and the Council fleet. It had been used as a routine data exchange point for 11 years and had no weapons systems, no military hardware, and a coffee machine that Lena Voss declared to be the most important piece of equipment on the station within the first 10 minutes of arrival. The negotiations lasted 11 days. Kate arrived with a team of 6, Lena Voss as her primary translator and linguistic analyst, Dean Frost as her intelligence advisor, present to ensure that nothing the Council offered was being used as a secondary data collection effort. A legal specialist named Grace Holt, who had spent 15 years studying the Council's legal framework from documents gathered by Earth's intelligence services over the previous decade, and who had been preparing for this scenario with the focused determination of someone who knows their moment will eventually arrive. 2 junior diplomats named Owen Webb and Clara Kim, who were there to learn and to take notes, and to handle the logistics that kept everything working, and a communications officer named Philip Lee, who managed every transmission in and out of the station, with the care of someone who understood that in a negotiation of this kind, every transmitted word was a word the other side would analyze. The council sent 9 representatives. Vorlin led the delegation by rank, but the person who actually directed the council's negotiating position, as Kate recognized within 4 hours, was Sira. Sira asked better questions. Sira listened more carefully, and Sira had read Earth's history in full. They understood each other's styles within the first day. Kate respected Sira immediately, in the way one skilled person recognizes another, and whatever tension existed between them was the productive tension of 2 people who both understood exactly what was happening and were trying to navigate it toward different outcomes. The first 3 days were spent on framework. The Council's diplomatic protocol required a formal acknowledgement of its authority before substantive discussions could begin. Kate agreed to this, then spent 4 hours with Grace and Lena working through the exact legal language of the acknowledgement, until they found a version the Council considered acceptable, and that, on close reading, committed Earth to nothing it was not already committed to under existing galactic communications law. Lena called it the most satisfying afternoon of her career. On the 4th day, Kate presented the document that she and Grace had been building for 3 years. It was formatted in the Council's own legal language, a translation Lena had completed to a level of precision that made several Council legal officers visibly uncomfortable with the competence involved. It proposed a restructuring of the Council's charter in 4 areas. The first was permanent membership. Earth requested a seat on the Council's governing body with full voting rights, equal in standing to the original member civilizations. The grounds cited were Earth's demonstrated technological capability, its galactic communication record, and a precedent from the Council's own charter that allowed for the elevation of any civilization meeting 3 specific criteria. Earth met all 3. Grace had found the precedent 11 months ago and had been waiting patiently for exactly this table. The second was sovereignty protections. The document proposed a formal charter amendment requiring approval from a full 2/3 Council vote before any member state could issue an ultimatum to a non-member civilization. The amendment included a retroactive clause requiring the Council to formally review each of the 19 previous ultimatums and document whether each had met the criteria the new amendment established. Several of them had not, and Grace had identified exactly which ones and included the documentation. The third was a mutual non-aggression framework with enforcement mechanisms that applied to every party, including the Council itself. This section generated the longest discussions, because the Council had operated for 200 years without meaningful limits on its own conduct, and the idea that a framework might apply equally to them as to others was one that required genuine time to settle. Kate gave them time. She was patient when patience was the right tool. The 4th section was the one Sira read 3 times before saying anything. It proposed that Earth serve as a point of contact and formal advocate for civilizations that did not yet hold Council membership. Not a protectorate structure, not a guardianship arrangement. Simply an open channel through which smaller civilizations could raise concerns and receive a guaranteed hearing at the Council level. The document called it a liaison function. What it actually was, as everyone in the room understood, was a structural guarantee that the Council could not apply quiet pressure to any civilization without Earth finding out about it immediately. Sira looked at Kate across the table for a long moment. "You have been planning this for some time," she said. "We have been planning for a number of eventualities," Kate said. "Not the specific wording of all of this." "Some of the specific wording," Kate said. "Grace is very thorough." Grace Holt, sitting 2 seats down, did not look up from her notes but allowed herself an expression that was not quite a smile. The discussions on the mutual framework took 4 days. On 2 occasions, the Council delegation requested a pause and withdrew for private discussion. Both times, Kate used the interval to review updates from Dean Frost's team, who were monitoring the solar system from Earth, where Ava Quinn's fleet remained in position and the orbital platforms remained aligned. She did not mention this to the council delegation. She did not need to. The situation had been established. It did not need to be referenced to remain present in the room. On the 9th day, Vorlin asked to speak to Kate privately. They met in one of the station's smaller rooms, a narrow space with a viewport facing the far stars. Vorlin was quieter than he had been at the start of the negotiations. He looked, Kate thought, like a man in the process of rearranging his understanding of something he had believed was fixed. "I want to understand something," he said, "outside of the formal record." "Go ahead," Kate said. "When you received the ultimatum," he said, "when you read it for the first time, were you afraid?" Kate thought about it honestly. "Yes," she said. "Of course, 47 warships at the edge of the solar system is a frightening thing." "But you sent a thank you note." "We were afraid," Kate said, "but we were also immediately thinking about what to do next. Those two things were happening at the same time." She looked at the stars through the viewport. "Fear does not stop us from working. It just makes us work faster." Vorlin was quiet for a moment. "We studied your history," he said. "I know you did." "I did not read all of it," he said. "Sira did. She tried to tell me." He paused. "I should have listened." Kate looked at him. "You are listening now," she said. "That is worth something." They returned to the formal session. On the 10th day, Lena made a quiet correction to the legal language in Section 2 of the framework document that closed a potential ambiguity the Council's legal team had identified. The Council's lead legal officer, who had been working against Lena for 6 days and had developed a professional respect for her that he clearly found inconvenient, accepted the correction with a nod. On the 11th day, the Council signed the charter. The signing was not dramatic. It took place at the main conference table without ceremony because Kate had specifically requested no ceremony, as ceremony tended to give people time to reconsider. Each section was signed in sequence. Vorlin signed for the Council delegation. Kate signed for Earth. Sira witnessed it for the Council's side and Grace Holt witnessed it for Earth. When it was done, Kate collected her copy and placed it carefully in her case. Sira walked around the table and stood beside her. "The liaison function," Sira said quietly. "The smaller civilizations. You built that for them specifically." "We built it because it was the right structure," Kate said. "We are going to need good neighbors." Sira looked at her for a moment. "You are a strange species," she said, "quite alarming in several ways." "We have heard that before," Kate said. Lena, passing behind them on her way to the coffee machine, said without looking up, "Usually from people who underestimated us." Sira almost smiled. 2 weeks after the signing, Adrian Cole published the complete technical documentation of the counter-frequency emitter on every public frequency Earth used, addressed to the general galactic broadcast band. Every species with a receiver could access it. The design included full construction specifications, material requirements, and calibration protocols. There were no restrictions on its use. There was no cost. It was simply available to anyone who could receive the signal. Dean Frost, reading the publication confirmation in his office, sent Adrian a one-line message. "Confirm you cleared this with Kate." Adrian replied. She wrote the cover letter. The publication generated significant discussion in council circles because the counter-frequency emitter was specifically effective against council shielding technology, and making it freely available to every civilization in the galaxy was a substantial shift in how the balance of capability was distributed. Kate, when asked about it at her first formal council session as Earth's new permanent representative, said it had seemed like a reasonable thing to share. Given that the technology had been made possible by the Council's own transmission data, and it felt right to return that value to the wider community. The Council had no formal objection procedure that applied to that answer. The counter-frequency documentation reached the outer systems within 72 hours of its broadcast. 18 civilizations that had previously received Council ultimatums, but had never formally registered concerns, accessed the documentation within the first week. 3 of them, small and quiet, and having lived for years under the kind of low-level pressure that the old Council framework had made possible, contacted Earth's new liaison function within a month. Lena Voss handled the first contact personally. It was a civilization 3 star systems away, a species the Council had catalogued but not yet formally engaged, who had known of the Council's existence for 60 years and had spent most of those years making themselves appear as uninteresting as possible. They were not technologically advanced in any way the Council found worth noting. They were, however, extraordinary agricultural engineers, gifted builders, and possessed a form of long-range acoustic communication that Lena, upon reviewing the first transmission, immediately recognized as the most elegant signal encoding system she had ever encountered. She wrote a 40-page analysis of it that night and sent it to Kate with a note that said only, "We are going to learn so much." Kate read the note, set it aside, and smiled in the way she rarely smiled in public, the private kind that meant something had gone exactly as it should. The first formal Council session with Earth as a full member was held 2 months after the charter signing. Kate attended with Grace Holt, Philip Lee, and a junior diplomat named Mia Ross, who had joined the team after the negotiations and had spent the intervening weeks reading every document Lena had produced on Council protocol, which was a significant undertaking. Kate addressed the Council for 11 minutes on the subject of the new member advocacy framework and the first 3 civilizations that had registered concerns. She was precise. She was warm. She was, to anyone watching who had not been present on Platform 7, exactly the kind of diplomat that a civilized interspecies council should have at its table. Vorlin was present at the session. He did not speak during Kate's address. Afterward, in the corridor outside the chamber, he passed her and her team and paused. "Your liaison cases," he said. "The 3 civilizations, I reviewed their files." "So did we," Kate said. 2 of them have Council engagement records logged as routine assessments. They were not on review routine." He paused. "I have asked the review committee to examine them." Kate looked at him for a moment. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and continued walking. It was, as far as diplomatic exchanges went, brief and unremarkable. But Lena, 2 steps behind Kate, pulled out her tablet as they turned the corner and made a note. "He is changing," she said quietly. "People do," Kate said, "when they are given enough information and enough time." "Is that what happened with the Council? We gave them information and time." Kate thought about it as they walked. "We gave them a situation where the information was unavoidable and the time was exactly 72 hours, she said, "which is a slightly different approach." Lena put her tablet away. "Slightly," she agreed. Ava Quinn's fleet returned to its undisclosed position 3 weeks after the charter signing. The return was noted in one line in the Defense Command's internal record, filed under routine fleet repositioning. The official public registry continued to list Ava Quinn's command as Deep Space Patrol, Sector 7. This was technically true. It was also still somewhat incomplete. In the lobby of the United Earth Parliament building, the thank you note was mounted in a simple frame, printed on standard diplomatic paper in the same font as every other official communication Earth sent. It was brief enough that most visitors read it in full without intending to. Below it, a small plaque had been placed during a quiet ceremony that Neil Harper had insisted on, over the mild objection of Kate, who had suggested it was perhaps a bit much. The plaque read, "Sent at 3:47 in the morning, written in 11 minutes, time required to make it necessary 30 years. Visitors paused in front of it longer than they paused in front of anything else in the building. Some came back to read it a second time. A journalist asked Kate, 3 months after the signing, whether she had known when she sent the thank you note that it would work, whether she had known the plan would come together the way it did, that the engineering would succeed, that the fleet would hold position, that Ava's ships would arrive in time. Kate considered the question. "No," she said, "I did not know any of that." "Then why were you so calm?" the journalist asked. Kate thought about it for a moment. "Because I knew what we had been building for 30 years. I knew who was in every room working on every problem. And I knew that if there was any species in the galaxy that was going to find a way to turn a threat against itself, it was going to be us." She paused. The calm was not confidence that it would work. It was confidence in the people doing the work. The journalist wrote that down and did not ask another question. Outside, the city moved the way cities always move, full of ordinary light and ordinary people who had no idea that an alien fleet had once sat at the edge of their solar system, and had left having signed a document they never arrived intending to sign. They had gone about their lives through those 72 hours the way humans had always gone about their lives, when something large and frightening was happening somewhere out of sight. They had stayed home and waited, and trusted that the people in the rooms were doing what needed to be done. They had been right. Somewhere above them in the dark, in a sector of space that did not appear on any public chart, Ava Quinn's fleet held position and waited. It would always wait. It would always be ready. That was the part the galaxy was still learning to understand.